Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tallahassee All Together, the City of Tallahassee's first virtual Race Relations Summit. I'm Sergeant Charzetta Felton-Stevens with the Tallahassee Police Department and a member of the 2020 Public Service Initiative Program. Thank you for joining us for the Make It Funny, Finding and Writing Humor in 2020 workshop. Before we meet our presenter, let's go over a few housekeeping items. The presentation is scheduled for approximately 2 hours. Please be aware the session is being recorded. If you have a question or comment, please type it in the chat feature, which is located at the bottom right corner of your screen. We will address as many questions as time allows, sometimes combining similar questions, striving to cover a variety of topics. If you don't hear your question, it could be combined with other similar questions. All points of view are welcomed, and we ask that your questions be presented in a respectful manner. Please remember to complete your session evaluation form, which will be emailed to you following the workshop. Thank you in advance for your attention to this presentation, which was developed with you in mind. Now let's meet today's presenter. Juliana Jewell Smith is a writer and educator who focuses on using humor to challenge presumptions about race, class, gender, and sexuality. She is the creator and writer of the comic strip Afrocentric and the short web series Sasha and Candy. In 2016, Smith took home the Glyph Award for Best Writer for Volume 4 of Afrocentric, the first woman to receive the award. She won the 2018 Glyph Award for Best Comic Strip or Web Comic for Afrocentric Volumes 1 through 4. Smith earned her BA in Sociology from University of California, Riverside, and MA in Ethnic Studies from UC San Diego. She has given talks about the relationship between humor and using comic books and comic strips to address issues of social justice at the Schoenberg Center, Brown University Studio Museum of Harlem. Without further delay, let's welcome Juliana Jewell Smith.
Can you hear me? Great. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you to all the participants that are here. You could have been doing anything, but you're here at this workshop, so I just want to say I appreciate you for taking the time out today to get into this workshop. I'm so curious to hear what you all are hoping to get out of this, so that will be part of what we'll go over in a little bit. But I did want to start out by saying that, before we get started, I wanted to say that I had a number of people reach out to me before this conference and ask me to speak on what's happening in Tallahassee, especially with the Tallahassee 19 and the police killings of Tony McDade, Michael Johnson, and Wilbin Woodard. And I just wanted to thank those of you who reached out to me with your concerns. I also want to be clear that I fully support the anti-racist work that's being done by the Tallahassee Community Action Committee, the Dream Defenders, More Than a Name, and Black Lives Matter organizers in Tallahassee and neighboring cities. I will always be in solidarity with anyone who resists white supremacy and acts of terror and those who uphold those systems of power. I recognize that bringing outsiders to do everything from anti-racist workshops to facilitated talks relieves the city of acknowledging their own problematic relationship to anti-racist organizers in their own city, organizers who have been doing this work for years. It's not lost on me that those organizers are not present at these panels and workshops. So, in the spirit of this summit's goal to transform systems and eliminate racial disparities, and in solidarity with the local organizers here in Tallahassee who are fighting for Black lives, I'm going to put a link to the Tallahassee 19's GoFundMe campaign here in the chat. And I encourage audience members to do research about what's happening. I'm going to pledge $100 to the GoFundMe. And for those of you that have the means, I encourage you to donate as well. So I'm just going to put that in the chat for everyone. And thank you. I just wanted to make sure to be clear. So thank you again. I'm going to go through the format, the ground rules, the expectations of this workshop, kind of reiterating a little bit about what Sergeant Felton said. We're going to try to make this workshop as interactive as possible, even though I cannot see anyone, and it's kind of weird that I can't see anyone and read any expressions. We're still going to try to make it as interactive as possible. I see that we have close to 40 participants here, which is amazing and awesome. So again, shout out to you all for being here. So in the spirit of an interactive workshop, your participation in the chat box on your right is going to be really important. So housekeeping, which Sergeant Felton already explained, but if you go to your chat, it should say that you are, when you go to your chat, you are actually sending the chat to everyone, not just panelists, not just hosts, but everyone in the workshop. So that's some of the formatting. Ground rules for me, again, just be an open participant, be an active participant. That's what's going to make this workshop go really well. And then the other big thing I would say is just be okay with making mistakes. One of the things about writing is that in order to be a good writer, you have to continue to write and edit a lot. So the first thing that you write is probably not going to be that good. And that's okay. So just be okay with knowing that that first thing that you write in this workshop, especially if this is your first time, if you're already a writer, whatever it is, doesn't matter your career. Just know that like it's going to take some time to create the work and the jokes that you want to create. Okay. Great. So that's actually one of my comic strips on that page right there, but we'll go to the next slide here. Great. So we'll be going over a formula for writing comic strips. We'll also be going over how to write humor and how to structure your comic strips, some general principles on how to write humor. But comic strips are really helpful in the sense that because we don't have a lot of real estate, we have a very, 2, 3 panels, maybe 4 at the most panels to try to get your joke in. So that's like 2 to 3 lines, right? Oh, thank you for folks that are on chat to everyone. Okay, yeah, maybe somebody can help with that. We want to make sure that we can see all of your chats and questions. If for some reason we can't see what you've said, I think there's also the Q&A that might be an option as well. So thank you for pointing that out. So how to structure a comic strip, how to make a joke in 2 to 4 lines. It's tough, but you got to cut down to the meat. That's what we're going to work on. We're also going to look at different types of humor. It may feel formulaic, but just knowing what satire, irony, wordplay, topical humor is will be helpful in order for you to find your voice. And then we're going to practice. We have 2 main activities for the workshop. And yeah, we'll practice. We'll set up some time, 5 to 10 minutes for each practice round of writing these jokes and these comic strips. And we'll get started. One thing that I do want to say is if you don't already have it, just grab a pen and paper. We'll be basically creating these like panel comic strips that you can see here. But any pen or paper will work. Pencil, doesn't matter. Again, we're writing comic strips, but we're really focusing on the writing, not so much on the drawing. So be open to what you have to offer there. Yeah, okay. And then we're going to be doing some editing, talking about editing. Great. So let's go to the next slide. So a little bit about me as we get started here. As Sergeant Felton said, my name is Jules Smith. I wanted to give you a little bit of background on myself, how I get started, but also let's loosen up and again, it's kind of weird to loosen up when I'm just looking at myself and I can't see the audience, but I hope you can feel me. Uh, this is what I'm currently watching. I'm currently watching the 40-year-old version on Netflix. I am also I recently watched Welcome to Bootopia, the comedy special with Michelle Buteau, which was amazing. I'm currently reading Heavy by Keith Lehman. And also She Came to Slay by Erica Dunbar, which is a kind of picture book, but also a historical book about Harriet Tubman, which is awesome. I encourage y'all to check that out. The last concert I went to was a concert called Smart, Funny, and Black with Amanda Seales. Remember concerts? Remember being in person? Yeah, that was like in February. So I thought about that as something that I wanted to share because it feels like the last time I've like actually interacted with a lot of people. And yeah, I'm the writer and creator of this comic book called Halfrocentric. You can look it up at halfrocentric.com. I also am the co-creator of a web series called Sasha and Condi, which I'll talk a little bit more about. Next slide. So yeah, let's see. Yeah, if the chat with everyone function isn't working, you can chat with the panelists. And I'd love to hear if you guys can put in the chat, just share the last comedy special or TV show that you watched. I just want to get a sense of like what y'all are watching right now and where your head is at in terms of humor. So go ahead and put that in the chat. Hopefully we'll be able to see it here and I can get a sense of where folks are coming from. Yes. Okay. Somebody just watched 40-year-old version. Yes. Sisters. Sister or sisters? Borat. Okay. Good. That's good satire. That's great. LA's finest. I don't know that. Sisters BET. Okay. Sorry, I don't have cable, but I appreciate it. I'll check it out. Ooh, Hannah Gadsby. She is amazing. Yes. SNL. Solid. Yes. Love it. Raising Dion. I haven't watched. That's on Netflix yet. Okay. Dave Chappelle. Okay. Solid. These are great. Sam J. 3 a.m. in the morning. I loved it. Oh my goodness. Love it. Love it. Cool. When we will do, if there's one or two more. Okay, maybe that's it for. Okay. Cool. All right. So, how did I become a comic book writer? So, we actually have live footage of me from my previous profession, which was a college professor. Hit that next slide, Josh. Y'all, that was me. I was a frustrated college professor. This is not a lie. And one of the things that I was frustrated about is that my students wouldn't do any of my readings. So, yeah, this was me being frustrated, trying to figure out how I could connect to my students, possibly lashing out in class. Hit that next slide. And what teaching taught me in that moment is, was I really ready to teach? Was I really a good teacher? So I really had to start thinking about like, how could I connect with my students? And I went through a lot of existential crisis, let's say. Hit that next slide. Is this always what you wanted to do? I had to ask myself that because I was really not clear that what I was doing was a good job of teaching in class. So I ended up, if y'all know how the community college system works, you probably teach at a college, but you also probably have 10 other jobs. And I did have another job. I was teaching in an after-school program. And in that after-school program, we were teaching young students how to write comic books. And my friend that was teaching the class was like, yo, you should write comics. And I was like, I don't know anything about writing comics. And he's like, no, you should write it. So I originally started writing comic books, and a friend suggested it. Hit the next slide. And that was me, y'all. I just slid into this. I just started doing it. And sometimes that's the biggest thing that you can do is just start. I know that seems really silly, but starting is probably like one of the hardest things, that and marketing. So I started writing comics. I started writing a comic book. What it turned into was me kind of musing on the relationship between my brother and I, some of my friends and acquaintances, um, the town that I grew up in, and how I came to be who I was, right? I loosely based the main character off of myself and my brother as one of the characters. And I also, I wanted to be able to talk about like some of the things that were happening. This was when I was still in Oakland, California, but as I was teaching in Oakland, California, things around gentrification, and I wanted to be able to like speak to what was happening and what my role was in this moment. So I started writing, and then next slide. To my surprise, after a few years, we got some accolades. We got best web comic strip. We got best writer, or we, as in me, got best writer. So I was really surprised at, how people received my writing. And that was a great inspiration to keep going. Not that you need awards to keep going, but it is always nice to have some acknowledgement. So, yeah, so let's click that next slide. Yeah, so this is what it is. Afrocentric. I made up the word. It's emphasis on the difficulty of being Afrocentric in a Eurocentric world, relating to, measured from, or as if observed from one's blackness. So the two main characters are mixed. That's where the half in Afrocentric comes from. And also the play on words of, trying to be Afrocentric in a Eurocentric world. So that's a made-up word. I also was heavily inspired by the Boondocks. If you all are familiar with the Boondocks, that is one of my favorites. I took a lot of cues from Aaron Magruder's Boondocks. So click the next slide. My latest project is a project called Sasha and Condi. It's a documentary. It is both animated and live action, as you can see here. It's two women retelling their stories of growing up in the 90s and how they changed history. So it's a fun series to work on. It's also been kind of going into a bunch of film festivals this year, and we just got picked up by this network called Quality TV, which is kind of like a black Netflix. They pick up films from film festivals all over the world. So we're going to be streaming there. And yeah, so again, this is me over the course of, 8+ years figuring out how to do this. And not really starting with any background, just doing it. So anyone here can do it, I promise you. Cool. Okay. So again, in the spirit of being interactive, I would love to hear kind of what brought you to this workshop and what you hope to learn in the chat. And maybe Josh or somebody can share it with me since I can't see everything. But yes, I'm going to give you a few minutes. Tell me what brought you to this workshop and what you hope to learn. Ooh, another way of conflict. Thank you, Angela. I love that. That's great. Yeah. We're gonna talk about that. Because that is something that I think about a lot. Another way to handle conflict, and also another way to try to think about these moments, especially like 2020. Yeah. Yes. Okay, great. You're a teacher. Yes. Oh my God, I love you, teachers. Right, music. Black and Sexy TV. Great. Channel Frustrations. Yes. Yes. It was after work. Okay, cool, cool. And I don't know. It's all good. I'm glad you're here. You don't have to know a lot about writing comics. Oh, okay. Yes. Shout out to all the teachers that made your students come here. I love it. And thank you for being here. Yes. This year is, it's, man, if you can find some humor or some joy, you're doing yourself a mental favor. Yes. Coping with current state of existence. Yes. Awesome. Wow, these are great. These are great. Josh, if there's any more, continue my education on diversity. Okay, great. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Great. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna address some of the things that folks brought up, and I'm so glad that you all shared what kind of brought you here. Um, One of the things that I love this quote: comics are malleable. They can be both proselytizing and informing, condensing complex narratives into a digestible format with broad appeal. And so one of the things that I love about comics, again, is because you have such a short amount of space, even if you do comic books, you still have small amounts of space. So how can you tell the joke and be funny and be quick? That is, that is like a skill unto itself. And also, comics do an amazing job of allowing us to kind of relax ourselves into thinking about somebody else's perspective. So as a teacher, I always used to use comic books as a teaching tool for all the teachers out there. So yeah, great. So yeah, we're gonna identify a formula for writing comic strips. So let's go to the next slide. Yes. So this is another way that I start to think about like the comic strip that I'm going to write, but also like what's really important, what's going to be really important for you all is discovering your voice. So one of the first things that I realize is that my 4 to 6 characters that are reoccurring in my comic strip, they're all based at a university, a fictitious one, but a university nonetheless. And so what that means is I'm going to talk about, generally speaking, what's happening with young folks. Now, granted, I started this like 10 years ago and I was a little bit younger, so I was a little bit more plugged in. But I also realized that like I was going to talk about current events through the lens of these different characters. So, finding the subject. If you are one of those people that's like, man, my entire life is like being at home, so I want to talk about relationships. I want to talk about family stuff. Let that be your voice. If you want to talk about, for me, it's like I talk a lot about current events and pop culture. So that becomes like the crux of like the subject that I'm writing on. Um, but there's also like, like the Dilberts of the world who just focus on like what it's like at work. So there are those things. So think about what your subject, what you would be interested in writing over and over, right? Or what are the things that have been on your mind lately? What are things that have been coming up for you? Probably the most low-hanging fruit right now is like the coronavirus, which is totally fine to use that as your joke. But then that maybe means that maybe you really want to talk about current events. Maybe that's your thing, to talk about like what's in the news. So be thinking about that. And then the third question that I have for you, and again, we're going to go over this a little bit more in detail, is what are some dominant narratives that can be questioned? So what I mean by dominant narratives is, what are the things that I constantly see on the news? What are the things that I constantly see on CNN and in the news, in my Instagram feed, whatever it is? What are some of those dominant narratives, and how can I bring a different perspective to those narratives, right? Cool. So what I want you all to do is, again, in the spirit of interaction, share in the chat what subjects you all are just even thinking about writing about your topic. It can be something that I haven't highlighted from here, but I'd love to hear what folks are thinking about. So we'll do a few minutes of that, and Josh will do the extra work of relaying. Pool rules. Okay, cool. I like that. Any other subjects that folks are thinking about? Conspiracy theory. Oh man, that I like that one. I actually have a character that loves conspiracy theories as well. So I really like that. Yeah, coronavirus. It's everywhere. Yeah. Okay, I got a joke about the smell and coronavirus. Feminism, separation of church and state. Yes, love it. Raising children with the age of virus being whew. Yes. You could do a whole series on what it's like to live in a global pandemic in your house. And the setting is always your house. The environment, yes. Talking about autism community. Yes. Oh my God, this is great. Yeah, the autistic community. Yes, this is an amazing bundle of ideas here. What I love about the autism community too, one of the beautiful things about humor is you get to bring in perspectives that aren't otherwise heard. I don't know if you're also the person that put Hannah Gadsby, but she's autistic. She talks about that. I think it's amazing. Yeah. Can I go to space now so I can be safe? Woo! Bird. Yeah. Yeah, exploring space. That's a good one. Reframing the idea of prison abolition for easier public consumption to push forward the movement. Yes. By the way, Oriana, one of the books that I used in my class that was an absolute game changer for me, and actually shifted why I used comics, is a book called The Real Cost of Prisons. You can actually get this comic book online for free. Actually, you can download it as a PDF, and it is a three-part series that deals with the expansion of prisons, looking at prison towns, the war on drugs, with particularly women and Black women being the fastest growing population of prisoners. And it's just an amazing series, and it really distills a lot of complex kind of things, social phenomenon that had to happen that makes the U.S. the largest incarcerator in the world. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Muscular dystrophy. Okay. Josh, I don't know who that is, but okay. When do we return to normal? Will it be the same? The pandemic's impact on kids? Yes. How to go on vacations? Forced staycations. Well, that's a good joke there. There's a joke in there. Forced staycations. Well, yeah. Okay, golf courses, yeah, and people wanting their tea times. There's a lot with the coronavirus, y'all. How the children communicate with each other over the internet right before class starts every morning since school. Yeah, okay, there's definitely a joke in there. how children communicate with each other over the internet right before class starts. Lots of jokes, lots of fodder in there. Yes, thank you. I love it. Okay, this is another one. Where did space come from? I mean, really, yeah, these are good questions, good subjects. Uh, I love it. We know Earth came from a collision, but space, okay. Okay, I feel like there's some jokes in there. So we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, but like your first thoughts around these things, you should get them all out. So like if you want to talk about space, for instance, how the Earth was created, think about all the dominant narratives that exist. What are all the things that people already say all the time, right? And then you want to say something either different or in conversation that's a little bit of a different perspective. Okay, Michaela says other drivers on the road. Okay, you can have a whole comic strip about what it's like to drive on the road now. I don't know about you guys, but in Oakland, it feels like people are driving crazier than they ever were during this pandemic. It's very weird. Okay, do we have any more? Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next slide. Yeah. So again, you want to come up with your subject, right? What's the thing that you're going to write about? So your subject, also thinking about it like in a macro sense, like I always want to write about current events. Okay, let's wheel that down. What's happening right now? Coronavirus, obviously. Elections, da 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 da. Narrower and narrower, right? So if I know that my voice is like really responding to popular culture and events and current events and things like that, I'm going to distill it into like those are the things that I'm going to talk about. But if I just want to focus on, as some of you said, like I just want to do a comic strip about family and what it's like to work from home in a pandemic, or those kinds of things, then that could be your subject. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is prior knowledge. So prior knowledge is really like, what's the shared culture that you and your audience have, or that you and your readers have, right? There's a lot of assumptions that we make as writers around, like, I'm going to make this joke, and there's already some things that I'm assuming that you already know, right? So what's that prior knowledge that people have to have? The other thing in terms of the formula is like starting with the ending. So what's the joke? Or if you don't know the joke yet, what's your commentary, right? So what's your commentary about space? What's your commentary about children and what they're doing before their teacher comes on the internet, right? You could take that a bunch of different ways. And this will ultimately, like later in your career, help you to figure out like who is your audience, right? If the commentary, like for me, for instance, with Afrocentric, when I first started writing it, I was like, yo, I'm just doing this for me. This is catharsis. Like, I'm having a hard time as a teacher. This is just what I want to do. But as I started putting the comic out more and more on different websites, and then specifically Instagram, what I realized is, like, generally speaking, my audience is like Black folks, Black women in particular, people aged like 20 to 45, and I can get all this information from Instagram because, Instagram be telling you everything. I know what cities I have most interest in. So like Oakland, New York, Atlanta, those are cities that like end up being very interested in the comic. So those are things that maybe you don't know at first, but you'll kind of realize as you're writing, like who is it that I'm writing to? Am I writing to other teachers, right? There's a shared language between teachers. Cool. Let me make sure. Yeah, so let's go to the next slide. So this is a comic strip that I wrote not too long ago. Let's see if we can do this in the chat. So what prior knowledge do you have to understand this joke? If you're reading this is your idea of Self-Care Sunday? And then Naima goes, did Josephine Baker become a French spy with ashy elbows? I didn't think so. So, what's some of the prior knowledge you have to have in order to understand this joke? Who Josephine Baker is? Yes. But even if you don't know Josephine Baker, you can kind of get a sense. But yes, Josephine Baker, what else? What is she doing in the background? Testing lotion. Yes. How many of you have ever tested lotion in a grocery store? Thank you, Caitlin. Yes, right? Okay. Not just me. Okay. Yeah. And the lotion and the cologne. Okay, yeah. What about self-care? She is filling up her bottle with tester lotion. That's the thing. So, there's a lot going on in this joke, even though there's only 2 lines. Here's what we know. We know that she's at some kind of grocery store, maybe a health food store or something like a Whole Foods, let's say. She's taking the tester lotion and putting it in her own bottle, right? The other thing we know, and as y'all know, that's free. So she's maybe cheap, maybe she's broke. We don't know, but it's one of the two. And she also wants to practice self-care. So the other thing that you need to know is what's the culture around self-care, right? And this is kind of what I'm poking fun at a little bit. There's self-care. We all talk about it a lot, especially if you're in a very stressful profession, right? Somebody might say oh man, you got to take a day self-care, right? Yeah. So that's some of the prior knowledge that you have to have. And then Josephine Baker, if you didn't know, think of her like the Cardi B of her time, but she ends up being an expat in France and then becomes a French spy. So to me, what that signals is she was done with the U.S., she was done with U.S. racism, she was like, I'm going to France, and oh, by the way, I'm going to be a French spy. So there's a lot to unpack there. That's what I was thinking about when I wrote it. But not only that, she's an amazing dancer, and I'm pretty sure she was never ashy. So there's a lot that goes into this. Also, in comic strips especially, you have the background as another way to kind of tell the joke, if that makes sense. Okay, great. Let's go on to the next slide. Yes, so as you can see, even in that comic strip, be concise, write less, say more. This is really hard to do. This is probably the hardest part to do about comic strips, but also jokes in general. You don't want them to go way too far. You want to be able to distill it, right? Okay, next slide. Great. Okay. So what we're going to do now is, and let's see what time it is. 3:40. Okay. Let's do 10 minutes. 10, 15 minutes for this. So what I want you all to do is you are going to draw your own panels. These are panels. This is 3 panels. You're going to draw 3 panels on your paper. It could be 3. It could be 1 panel. It could be 2 panels. It could be 3, 4. Doesn't matter. You're trying to figure out what your joke is, right? So in order to do that, sometimes, like for me, I write the script first. And also, I should say, one of the things that I didn't even say is I'm the writer of the comic strip, Afrocentric, but I have a team. So I have an illustrator and a colorist. You can ask me questions about that later. But in terms of my team, what I do first is I write the script first. And in the script, I'll write like descriptions of what I want certain things to look like. If it's just talking heads and it's just the characters, I won't really specify because my illustrator will know that. But if there's something like very detailed, like for instance, that last comic strip that you saw, I wanted her to be in a place where there was tester lotions and all these like health food or health like goodies in the background, right? So specify that. And then when you write your own comic, this is generally good for storytelling. Anyone that's ever written a story, a lot of people would be like, oh, what you need is a beginning, middle, and end. No, that's not what you need. What you need is a conflict. That is the thing. I had to learn that the hard way. So the conflict or the challenge is the thing that is propelling your writing, right? So this is kind of like storytelling art. Introduce the conflict, make your characters have to have a choice, and then there's an outcome. We have a small real estate, so we're going to try to do that in a really small amount of time. So, but be thinking about these things. Like immediately as a comic strip, you should kind of like introduce the problem. The problem can also be like in somebody's head too. So don't get so caught up on thinking that your conflict has to be so explicit, right? In that last comic strip, the conflict is that she's trying to have self-care, but she's either cheap or broke, and so she's got to use the tester lotion. I mean, people can understand that, right? So let's do. So it's 3:43 right now. What I would love is for the next, let's say, 10 to 12 minutes, I'm going to have you all write your own comic strip. You can do it in this form and do a drawing and just like stick figures, or you can just write a script. Either way, right? But be thinking about it in the form of a comic strip. Cool? So, yeah, let's like start that invisible timer. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll respond to them. But 10 to 12 minutes. So I got real quick, I got a message. Gianna is saying, I think I've got an idea for one, but I'm not sure if I turn it into a joke. That's okay. So right now, what you want to do is, sometimes what I'll do is like, you know, like old school, like teachers, right? Sometimes what's really helpful, I don't know if you can see this. Can you see this? Anyways, so here's space. Somebody wanted to write about space, right? So off of space, outer space that is, what are all the jokes that you can start to think of, right? Or even the subjects around space. I'm just gonna come up with a few. Or subjects around space. So here is this is space. I'm starting to write like different subjects. I don't know if you guys can see this, but different subjects around outer space. So like Tesla, right? Tesla going to Mars. Planets, okay. Uranus. Low-hanging fruit, I know, but it's an easy joke. So it's there if you want it. So be thinking about like, okay, I know I want to talk about like this thing, but how do I begin to start to come up with the joke, right? So that could be your first thing, is just starting to brainstorm what it is that you're going to stop or start at, right? Mind map. Yes. Yes, exactly. Somebody said mind map. Yeah. And think about what's the thing that you want to say. What's the commentary that you have? Like, is your commentary like, why are you wasting money going to Mars when you could just try to fix climate change here? Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. If that's your thing, how are you going to say that, right? And this is where like different types of humor are going to come in that we'll talk about, but be thinking about like, what is it that I want to say? What's my commentary? And then you can kind of go from there. I hope that helps. Okay. So let's start to come back. Okay, thank you, Oliver, for sharing yours. I appreciate that. So you got the conflict, 14 men in the division, only one black, 13 white. The choice, stay because love the job, feel like no mistakes can ever be made. So this is really good. Like, so Oliver's come up with the conflict and the choice, right? So how now do you distill this conflict and then like the choice to stay, right? How do you make that funny, right? I'm not sure what you mean by division, but I'm assuming it's like your department or something. So yeah, you have to distill it down now. It's good that you have like the conflict and you have your subject, what you're gonna say. That's really great. We also have another one from Chedza. Mouthwash. Okay, so we got a joke about COVID and smell tests and breathing. I like that. Thank you. Okay. Okay, we got. Thank you guys for sharing. I actually wasn't even going to do a shout out, but I appreciate. I love this. This is great. Old man sits at a bar and asks the bartender what's good. The calamari is flexed and the egg rolls go hard. Old man looks very confused and doesn't know what it means, if it's good or bad. Old man takes a chance and orders the egg rolls, tells the bartender they were really good. I know, it slaps, right? Good one. I like it. Okay, I'm reading into like a lot of this stuff here. I can kind of see it happening. So this is really good. Like actually, Sarah's the one that wrote this. So let's go to the next slide because I think what you brought up really is going to tie into this different types of humor. So not to be formulaic, but what's going to be helpful in terms of finding your voice is like what you want to play on, right? So Sarah just wrote this joke about like an old man sitting at the bar, not really understanding what the bartender's saying because like there's this age gap. So this is really good, a really good example of wordplay, right? Like, yeah, it slaps, it's good, it's da 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 da, but like he doesn't really know what it means. So in these videos, what I wanted to show you all is examples of different types of humor. So actually, Josh, can you put these links in? Thank you, Josh. Josh is going to put these links in the chat. And what I want you all to do, we're going to take a break because I believe in breaks. If y'all are teachers, you know that students need breaks, and so do adults. So what I want you to do in this next 5 minutes, we don't have a ton of time, but we're going to continue to talk about different types of humor. And what is really helpful here is to like look at examples of different types of humor. So the Key and Peele one is a good one of like topical, like current events plus wordplay. This one from A Black Lady Sketch Show does a really good job of satire and irony, and we're going to talk about that. Like how does this character kind of like exaggerate like the thing that kind of makes her invisible, but also like it speaks to fat phobia, it speaks to you know, I don't know, masculine identities with female characters. So I want you to take a look at, you probably don't even have like time to watch one. And then this slapstick one, I don't know why, every time I watch it, it just makes me laugh. But take a look at that. It's only like 20 seconds. And thank you guys for sharing more of your scripts. I really I really appreciate that. Yes, getting hit on by treatment. Okay, cool. Okay, so we are going to take a 5-minute break. I actually have a slide for that, but I kind of want to keep this slide up. So let's take a 5-minute break, and I want to ask you all to watch at least one of these sketches so we can come back, and even though we can't have a discussion as such, you can tell me what you thought in the chat. So let's take that 5-minute break, watch these for different types of humor, examples, and we'll come back. All right, so let's come back. Hopefully you all got a chance to watch at least one of those videos, but I highly recommend that you end up watching them later. They're all really good and great examples of how to write humor. Granted, I know it's not in the form of a comic strip, but I think it gives us a lot to work with in terms of breaking down how to write jokes. So let's go on to the next slide. Yeah, great. So now we're going to talk about how to write humor and some skills that we can employ to make a joke. But before we do that, let's go on to the next slide. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of you already answered this, but why is humor necessary in this moment? If you all can put in the chat, like, for you, why does humor feel necessary in this moment? That'd be great. Lighting dark times. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you, Gianna. It helps me breathe. I hear you, Wendell. I'm assuming that says gotta laugh to keep from crying. Yes. There's so much stress, and yes, humor lightens that load. Absolutely. To help cope and also bring about change. Yep. Gotta laugh. Yep. Yeah, it can take your mind off of stress, pain, those, absolutely. For mental health, I absolutely believe that, like, you know, Saul Williams has this quote where he says, like, your diet is also like what you ingest, like, in terms of what you view. I'm only watching comedy right now because the world is too crazy. So I feel you on the mental health. Gianna, thank you for sharing that. Important to find our own humor because communities that are struggling and not doing shows. Access to comedy is limited right now. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Although a lot of comedians have popped up on like the YouTubes and the Instagrams, Jesse, because it's pandemonium right now. Yes. Yeah. Thank you guys for sharing. Also, I'd love to hear, I'm going to put on my teacher hat right now and just say, like, I'd love to hear from other folks that haven't put anything in the chat yet. I know we have 30-something participants, so I'd love to hear from everyone else too. If you haven't already, put something in the chat. So let's go to the next one, the next slide. Yeah, so here, like, I don't want to create so many rules that it makes it hard to write jokes, but here's what I will say, I'll offer up. And this is something that I've got from Key and Peele, actually, in one of their interviews. Punch up, not down. What does that mean? Simply speaking, making fun of people that have less power than you is not funny. So, for instance, a Trump rally. So when Trump makes fun of disabled people, it's not funny because he's an able-bodied, cis, hetero male. It's just not funny. It's just mean, plain mean. So in terms of power, be thinking about, like, you know, for your own identities, right? Be thinking about, like, you know, the patriarchies and the racism and all those things. That'll help you understand, like, what punching up and punching down means. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat. Yes, great. Other benefits of humor. I think a lot of you all spoke to this. Humor helps address tough, hard to talk about subjects. It helps process challenges, failures, and success. Somebody mentioned Hannah Gadsby. I thought she did, like, an amazing job on her comedy special, processing different challenges. Highlight anything from contradictions that you see in the world and inequality to mistakes that you've made. So you can go, like, all the way macro, like how sometimes I do. I do a lot of current event stuff, all the way to, like, something very, very personal, right? And it helps us all connect, right? So, and the other thing, and somebody wrote this in the chat, you get to amplify the voice of marginalized people. So when you're creating your characters, one of the beautiful things is, for instance, somebody had, like, putting, like, making the autistic community more visible. I think that's amazing. And that really gets to the heart of, like, amplifying the voice of marginalized people, right? So yeah, it's, you know, one of the things that I think about when I write my jokes, and you'll see in these next few slides, is, you know, I'm writing the jokes to be funny, but also, like, I want to connect with people. I want to make people feel less crazy. I want them to know that there's other people that either think like this or have thought this. So that's really one of my goals when I do my writing. So let's go to the next slide. Yeah, great. Okay, so for these next few slides, let me look at the time. Yeah, for these next few slides, this is from my comic strip Afrocentric. I wanted to share with you just, like, a little bit about my process, but also, again, going back to these different types of humor. So I'll read it out loud. It's kind of weird to read it out loud, not knowing where everyone's head's at. So this is one of the characters. She says, people say black girls are magic, but I'm not so sure. I think white people are magic. I started making a list of all the movies white people have racially shapeshifted in. Tropic Thunder, Prince of Persia, Ghost in a Shell, Gods of Egypt, The Great Wall, Nina. Yeah, I'm convinced white people are magic. Okay, so we talked a little bit about dominant narratives. This is an example of what's the dominant narrative. There's a lot being said about black girl magic, even though it's kind of like, it's pretty mainstream, but a lot of people that use it, like, will say, like, it's attached to the things that are really positive. But I'm kind of flipping it on its head here with the dominant narrative. I'm changing that. So Again, what are a lot of people saying? What's the thing that you want to say that's different, right? Okay, let's go to the next slide. So this is another one I did. I actually literally went to a seminar, and it was all about being positive, and I just had to say something. So this is Naima, the character. She snaps a photo. She says, "Social media seminar I went to said engage your audience with enthusiasm and gratitude." And her friend Renee says, "Why are you writing #blessed on your Instagram when you're miserable?" And how many of you can relate? I mean, really. So there's a lot in there. This is topical in the sense that like a lot of us that post on Facebook and Instagrams and Twitters and all that, we're writing stuff about like how supposedly we feel when we actually don't feel like that. So there's that. That's topical. The next comic strip is Renee walking down the street. Renee is kind of my character who's like she's kind of like butch femme. She's walking down the street. And here I really wanted to tackle street harassment. So she's kind of getting street harassed. A guy goes, "Hey, Ma, can I talk to you?" She's like, "No, thank you." And then he says, "You look like a man anyways." And she's like, "Blessed. Thank you for seeing me." Okay. If you get the joke, you get it. Yeah. When you're trying to be seen, you take anything. It's like, yeah, I look like a man. What? I'm a butch, femme, whatever lesbian. So, okay. So, again, this is topical, talking about street harassment and the limited wordplay here. If you look like a man and like, oh, is that a bad thing? No. Okay, cool. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, little Trump humor for you here. Which, by the way, I try not to do too much Trump stuff because it's exhausting. There's too much to do. But anyways, so here we are. They're at their university. Welcome to the Ronald Reagan University Wikipedia Editathon. And you can see somebody's writing, "Donald Trump made America great, ... And then he gets slapped. That's a little slapstick for you. I'll let you guys read that. And then Kwame, the character, says, "Woo, can't wait for the next Wiki Editathon." So that's a little slapstick, as you can see. Again, only 2 lines in here, but you can kind of see that the setup is like somebody thought Donald Trump made America great. That's the conflict. And here is the choice to slap somebody. Okay. Sometimes you can't do what you want to do in real life. If there's some Trump supporters on here, oh man, that would be funny. Okay. This next one. So the 2 main characters are walking down the street. Naima says, "The problem with gentrification is that it ends up displacing so many Black folks." And Renee says, "I kind of like the new cafes, parklets, freshly painted bike lanes." And Naima goes, "Huh? Free Wi-Fi." She starts running. Well, that was a close one. And Renee says, "Did you go in there to check your email?" She says, "No, I'm out of data and I had to do a Google search for how to stop gentrification." All right. Hopefully you get the irony in that. I mean, if I have to explain, it's kind of weird, but yeah, the irony is like the things that gentrification brings in. I'm in Oakland, so I am experiencing like the tech wave, which is very prominent. So I wanted to talk about like our need for tech, but also like some of the things that tech brings that ends up displacing some people. So that's the irony there. All right, next one. All right, one of my faves. This is actually a riff off of a viral news clip that went around a few years ago. I'm not sure if you all saw it. But anyways, Renee is looking at her phone. She's watching a YouTube clip, and one of the women in the clip, she says, she didn't say this in real life, but she said something to this effect. She said, it's upsetting to me and my homegirl because we feel like, well, damn, if you can't punch a Nazi, who the hell can you punch? Okay. It's so funny doing this and not having an audience. So the idea here, I heard a lot of people a couple years ago talking about, is it okay to punch a Nazi? All those discussions. So again, tying into current events, but bringing that to like the ironic part is, if you saw the clip, you saw that she was like, she wanted to go to the club, and she was like, well, if I can't go to the club, where can I go? So hopefully you get that. Okay. I think there's maybe one more. Okay, that's it. Okay, great. So let's see in terms of timing. So we're at 4:20. Great. Thank you, Dontavius, for your shout out in the chat. If you like the jokes, give me a thumbs up or something. Or not. Cool. Okay. So this next activity is again to get your juices flowing. So I wrote some prompts for you all, and this time you can still work on the joke that you were writing before in activity 1, and again workshop it, edit it, keep going. But if you don't like maybe the subject that you came up with, here are a couple other subjects. And this is kind of a fun one. I know that a lot of you are on this are at this workshop because 2020 has been a year, y'all. So sometimes you got to write it out or draw it out. So 2020 in a nutshell. This might even look like maybe no lines or one line, or one panel, right? If you had to sum up 2020 in a nutshell, what would that look like? And again, if you feel like, oh, I'm not an illustrator, I can do that. Write it in the script, right? Tell me what's going on in the background. Tell me how people are interacting. Tell me the signs in the background, things like that, right? That's going to help propel the joke. Another prompt, somebody makes a weird comment about your identity. That's kind of likened back to the street harassment. You can kind of take that and flip it on its head, right? Think about a text that you read out of context. That may prompt a funny joke. An assumption that somebody has made about your name, your gender, your race, religion, whatever it is, right? I'm sure that's happened to almost everyone on this call, this workshop. So you can take that and run with it. Think about a time like that. Also, here's another prompt. Amazon Alexa assumed something. What did she assume, right? Maybe she's listening to you in the background. Maybe there's some wordplay thing in there that she does, or that she assumed from hearing you talk in the background. Another prompt, my phone auto-corrected. What's something that you say all the time, but, the iPhones wouldn't necessarily get that. Who knows? Or if you want to, again, kind of go for the dominant narrative, you can say, you know what they say, and whatever the line is, right? Whatever people are saying. It could be about the coronavirus. It could be about Black Lives Matter. It could be about anything. So, again, focus on your subject, figure out what that is, and then figure out what your joke is. And again, you're not going to hit comedy gold right now. That's okay. So we're just writing right now. And so let's see. We have, it's 4:24. I want to be conscious of time. So let's use this. Let's use about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. Actually, let's do until 4:40. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so 4:40. Let's have you workshop your joke, and then um, and then we'll come back if we have time. We'll do a share out, like a really short share out, how you guys have been doing in the chat, and then we'll do some Q&A. And I do have a survey for you all that I'd love to get your feedback on the workshop, and then the workshop will be over. So let's take these next 15, 20 minutes, till 4:40, and start writing your comic strip here. All right. Oh, I'm sorry, 7:40. I'm on the West Coast. Sorry. Okay, so we're going till 7:40. Okay, we just got a really funny joke from Gianna. So Gianna says her idea starts with Amazon Alexa. It starts with the character having a long day at work, at school, or work. She comes home and cries in bed. The next panel would be Alexa saying, okay, scheduling your therapy appointment for tomorrow at 11 a.m. And then the last panel being the character actually going because Alexa had a point. Gianna, I love this. This is so good. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, in 3 panels, boom, you did it. And what? That's maybe 2 lines. So great job. Okay. We got another one from Caitlin. Actually, keep these pouring in. This is really great. If y'all want to, if you have the joke, you wrote it, and you want to put it in the chat, that'd be great. People who say they want to travel the world or see the world, but are also rude to people who don't speak English. Facts, Caitlin. So the situation is a couple, seemingly wealthy, white, at a restaurant talking about their upcoming season of trips to lavish destinations, including a trip to Peru. Their server overhears them and walks up and says, "Estás visitando mi país de origen, Perú. Te encantará la hermosa Machu Picchu." And then the man angrily responds, "No hablo. This is America. We speak English." Good one, Caitlin. That's good. Yeah, this is like that. That's like a great example of irony. It's great. Yeah, keep them coming, you guys. Okay, we got a few more coming in. Cheta says, as I stand in front of a mic and say my name is Chiesa. I am so sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Someone from the audience yells, "Gesundet." Is that a German word? I don't know. Sorry. That's probably like wordplay for a language that I'm not understanding right now. Oh, Gesundheit. Okay, good one. Okay. Yeah, got you. I know what that means. Thank you. Appreciate it. Um, that's a good, dude, that's so good about your identity. Okay, I love it. Smart. Okay. Michaela writes, my elderly mother asked me to help her get the dead people out of her phone. Took me a minute to realize she wanted to remove the names of acquaintances who have passed away. Oh my God. That is hilarious. Michaela, comedy gold right there, for sure. That could be one panel. It could also be 2 panels. But yeah, wordplay is really good here, and speaks to, what it's like to be an elder in this world when like all your friends are like dying, I guess. Gianna says, another one could be the idea of space. The situation would be a character saying, 7 a.m. I have a class or work. The second panel, a thought bubble about how we live on a literal rock in a sea of nothingness. The last panel being the character going back to bed. Right. And this is a way to show loosening up and not taking things so seriously. Yeah, so like maybe a pan out. Yeah, maybe there could be maybe there's something there about like the rock in there. Okay, Mario, not sure about the illustration. I envision it as two panels, two people in a bed or a bedroom, gender not important. One of them not as attractive as you might wish for in this situation. Person leaving in the second panel fully suited up for Everest climb. If 2020 were a one-night stand, your walk of shame would be equivalent to walking up Mount Everest. Whoa, real talk. Mario, nice one, dude. I love it. 2020 in a nutshell. That feels apropos. Nice. Keep them coming. We got a few more minutes. Okay, we got another one from Oriana. We got a TED Talk, first panel, a TED Talk on the history of the civil rights movements in America. Panel 2, very real possibility of upcoming scaled back human rights in America. That's not a joke, young people. And panel 3, a random person shouting out, "This is why we need to vote Trump." Funny, not funny. Yeah, this is very ironic and very appropriate. Yeah, I like this. It could be like in the background you can have like the TED Talk, like the presentation slide saying something, and then like the rah-rah of like, oh, America's so great, but also like the reality that like a lot of rights are going to be scaled back. And then, yeah, why we need to vote for Trump. Yes, that makes perfect sense to me, Oriana. Thank you. Cool. We got about one more minute. Thank you, Ariana. We specialize in funny, not funny in this house. I appreciate that. Sometimes it's like that. That's pretty much what 2020 is. So if you have come up with your joke and you're open to sharing it, I would love to see it in the chat here. That would be awesome. I'll give you all a few more minutes to do that, but I'd love to see some more folks. And again, we're workshopping, so it's all good. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. That's what this is all about. This is all about the practice of writing and editing and writing. Okay, so it is 7:40 for a lot of y'all. It's 4:40 for me. We got about 20 minutes left. I wanted to make sure that we had at least 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes to do Q&A. So if you all have any questions for me, I'd love for you to drop it in the chat. But what I hope is that in this last activity, you kind of got your juices flowing. You figured out how to pick a subject. You know, at the very least, like you honed in on a subject, right? Maybe you didn't come up with a joke, but that's okay. That's what workshopping is all about. You're going to workshop your joke until you get it. And the other thing that I'll say too is in comic strips, and this is why it's great to write out what you all have written out, and Sometimes, like, when I write out my first comic strip scripts, like, they're really long. One of the things that I realized as a writer that I was doing that was a very kind of like thing that a lot of women do is, like, even in my dialogue, I was writing just. Well, I'm just da 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 da. No. If you only have 1 to 3 lines, maybe 4 lines, even a word is too much real estate. So you want to condense it down. You want to be concise. Can you still say the joke? Can it still be funny if you get rid of some of those words? And that's part of what the editing process looks like. So what I'm hoping that you all got here is, like, maybe you just got, like, the juices flowing. You got kind of like the joke out. The Alexa joke was great. I love that. So, like, if you're writing your script, the next thing that you'll do is, like, write the description of what your drawing will look like, and then also the dialogue, right? Great. So if you all want, I guess we can use the Q&A or we can use the chat, but let's see. Next slide. Yeah, Josh, can you go? Yeah, that's the next slide. Again, does anybody else have anything they want to share from what they wrote? That would be great. If not, we can move on to the Q&A. Mention Instagram and websites as a great outlet. Okay, cool. Q&A. Sarah asked, you mentioned Instagram and websites as a great outlet for your work. What other steps did you take to get started and put yourself out there? Yeah, okay, great question. So when I first started, the comic book I put out, the first comic book I put out, I went to what's called APE, the Alternative Press Expo. It's kind of like, it's like a Comic-Con, but really more for, like, independent booksellers and things like that. That's how I first got started. I wrote this comic book. I self-published it. That was the route that I went for. The thing about, and that was in person, that was great. Like, the thing that was great about that is I got experience trying to sell my book, which is like a whole nother thing. I could do a whole talk on that. But basically, you want to engage people as much as you can. If you have a book, you want them to touch it. I know it seems really silly. You want them to touch it. You want them to, like, flip pages and things like that. You want to keep talking to them as they come up to your table. Those are all, like, things that I had to learn along the way. But the thing about putting it on websites, for instance, Instagram, it's kind of a double-edged sword. So I have my own website, halfrocentric.com. I put the comic strip up there. The reality is most people find Halfrocentric through Instagram because there's just more people on there. And that's just the reality. Like, even if you have a website, most people aren't going to spend that much time on it. So having almost like Instagram is kind of like a living archive of all, like, my comic strips. And so I ended up putting it on there. Steps did you take to get started? Yeah, so, like, different Comic-Cons, different book conventions, things like that were really helpful. I know it's COVID, but they still have them going on. They're just virtual. And then I also did, when I first started my comic strip, I put it, I had a connection at Afropunk. They held it for a while, or they put it on for a while. Then I had this other feminist magazine that actually has gone out of business, but it was called The Establishment. They put it out. I got a few write-ups in, like, the SF Chronicle and a couple other places that were really helpful and put some eyes on it. But ultimately, Sarah, the other thing I would say too is start collecting emails. That's always really helpful. How did you build your base of viewers and drive people towards your content? Yeah, similar idea here. I think one of the things that I had to learn the hard way is I was doing comic books at first. It took me at least a year to put out like a 24 to 32 page comic. That is a lot of time of not engaging with my audience. So that's why I started doing comic strips where I put out like 1 to 2 every like 3 weeks. I try to put out one every week, but it's hard. Um, so consistency is really important. Um, yeah, and the other thing too I would say is like be consistent on the platform that you can stand to be on. I couldn't stand to be on Facebook. I just don't like it. I'm sorry, it's just not my thing. So even though like there's a Afrocentric that lives there, I know I'm not going to be on that. So I focus on Instagram. That's like my bread and butter. That's where I get the most views. I also have a newsletter, but again, Instagram is pretty much my go-to. Hashtags are helpful, but really just being consistent is helpful. How how do you stay so positive aside from creating comedy and content? What are some things you do to keep a solid mindset? Gianna, thank you for asking that. Again, I kind of go back to like the Saul Williams thing where he said that your diet is not just like your food intake. It is like the things you watch, the things that you consume, either buy or like consume on the internet. I try, I purposely stopped watching police violence and shit like that because my mental couldn't take it. Like, it's just too much, you know? So I've had a lot of feelings about like, am I not witnessing like my own people? Like, am I not being there with them? But for my own mental health, I realized that like I can't do that. So like I like to watch funny stuff. That's just me. It helps me stay in a good mood. Yeah. Where would be a good place to find a community of comic book artists, graphic novelists, etc., especially an intersectional and activist leaning one, whether online or in person, as is safe for now? So, Oriana, I am part of a group called the Women in Comics Collective um, out of New York City, but now they're international. They're on Facebook. They're pretty active on Facebook. They're on Twitter. They're also on Instagram. But there's mostly all female identified people that do comic books. Everyone from like illustrators, writers, colorists, um, like anyone you can think of, even people that are like just in the industry are in this. So it's Wink, women in Women in Comics Collective out of NYC. Yeah, I hope I'm saying that right. How can comic book writers and graphic novelists become more involved in the activism sphere? And who are the people currently killing this intersection? You're looking at a girl right here, killing this activism and comic book life right here. Who else? In terms of comics that are not animated, let me come back to you on that. I actually like Wink, the group that I mentioned, the Women in Comics Collective. Uh, they are a great place to start to look for, especially like independent artists that are doing this. Um, yeah, but let me think about that and come back to you. Do you feel or intend your comic humor to be activism or just funny? Just wondering. Ooh, good question. Um, this is interesting. Like, I always have the mindset of like social justice, obviously, but the thing that I always have to like center myself and go back to is that the thing that I'm trying to do is bring joy to people. And that's very difficult right now. It's hard to find sometimes the joy. Uh, so, but when I center myself on that, and I'm just like, okay, how can this be funny? Like, where's the funny in this? Where's the joke? That really helps me to not just like scream at all the things that are going on. So I intend the comic to be funny first, and then, I say what I have to say, basically. Cool. We got 8 minutes. Are there any other questions? I hope this is helpful. Don't go yet, all 25 people here, because let's actually go to the next slide, Josh. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, if you could copy that and put that in the chat, that'd be great. Thank you, Josh. So this is the GoFundMe for the Tallahassee 19. Again, I want to be in solidarity with those in Tallahassee that are doing this work and doing amazing work to move forward the movement for Black lives. So that's their GoFundMe there. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, if you all could do me the favor of going to the survey link. This is my personal survey. This really helps me in terms of, making sure my workshop is helpful to folks. If we can put that, yeah. Thanks, Josh. So this is the survey link to a survey that I came up with. Again, if I could have you all go to that and fill that out, that would be amazing. Again, it's really helpful for me. Anything that worked, things that worked, things that didn't work, the survey. I'll give you all a few minutes to fill that out. And in the meantime, if you come up with other questions, just put them in the chat so Josh can see them, and then I'll answer those. All right, so we have about 3 minutes left. Thank you to everyone that's filled out the survey. You can also do it after this is over, but I really, really appreciate you all filling out the survey. Like I said, it really helps me a great deal. And are there any remaining questions that you all have? Because I would love to. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Josh. Yeah, if you want to connect after this workshop, feel free to connect with me at hello@halfrocentric.com. At Halfrocentric and at Sasha and Condi are the addresses for the Instagram accounts. So definitely go follow me there. And yeah, any other questions? That we're coming up on our time. Yeah, so thank you to everyone that's come to the workshop. Again, don't be a stranger. Don't be a stranger. Connect online. I wish I could see your faces, but I can't. So I'm just hoping that they're all smiles. Appreciate it.